going to try and make a bottle rocket. I have some cereal boxes. The mini wheat, the big boxes of mini wheats, they actually are a thicker cardboard, which can work a little bit better, but I didn't have one that I was able to empty just yet. But either way, some cardboard will be great. You don't want it to be too thick and rigid though, because I find that stuff kinks and doesn't make a nice fin. Cracker box and so on. So when it comes to our bottle rocket, one common mistake that happens is students envision it this way. This is not the way the bottle will launch. It will launch this way. And we'll look at chemical reactions or physical changes that we can do in order to build pressure inside the bottle and have something come out this end, whether it's air or water, and in that process cause the rocket to go off that direction. So this is the way that the rocket will be set up. You can take the cap and nail it to a piece of wood or something like that, and that creates a stand for your rocket if you want to be able to have it standing up, especially if you end up making fins that are longer than the base. You can come up with different ways to have a stand. We'll look next week at making the launcher. So here we go. You can find all kinds of templates for the fins, something like this. Now you can see a fin like that goes down past the bottom. So if this bottle had this fin, it would become a problem if I was trying to stand it up. So just be aware of that. It's not a huge problem. It's also easy to change this fin if I want it to be shorter. I can just cut it, and now it's a little bit shorter. I can also, if I want it to be like flames or something, I could come up with some other designs. Well, that doesn't really look like flames, but anyways, your own creative juices. Okay. Now, how do I attach the fin? And I'm not going to use paper. Paper's too floppy. In fact, I find that's the main problem with most bottle rockets that get made. Either the fins aren't straight and they have kind of a curve to them, which causes sometimes it can cause it to spiral, which is cool, but generally it just causes it to shoot off to the side some direction, or they're floppy and they don't attach very well. So I'll show you a few things that I've come across in order to attach the fins. One is when you go to make your rocket fin, instead of tracing out and cutting out the entire shape, to just leave extra amount there. Now you can cut little slits and bend them back and forth, and when you go to attach it to the rocket, it gives you something that you can run tape along to be able to hold the fin to the bottle. Again, you can see though, well, what happened? How am I going to stop it from being crooked? How am I going to make sure it's rigid? Those are some of the problems that we'll face. And that's what we do with the design cycle, is we have a prototype, we have our idea, we make it, it doesn't really work very well, it's got some problems, so we remake it. Rarely does it ever work on the first try. It's usually on the 10th or 15th try, depending on how much time you're willing to commit. Anyways, so I traced whatever I want my fin to look like, and I drew this line so I know where it is, but then I added extra so that I can have those little tabs that I can glue to. I'm going to cut this one short. Make it have some flames coming out the bottom here. Now I have my fin, and I'm going to cut just those lines there. I'm not cutting along here, because if I go and cut along there, I lose all my little tabs. have my first fin. Now, in order to align these so that the fins aren't crooked and they're kind of straight, there's lots of different techniques that are out there. Sometimes people will use and decide if they're gonna have 3 fins or 4 fins. They'll use something like that, they'll hold it above, they'll use a level or something like that, they'll even tape like a pencil or a bamboo skewer along the side of the bottle, and then they can use a felt pen and draw the edge. So they have something to tape against. Sometimes people eyeball it. The better you can have your fin be parallel to the length of the rocket body and be not floppy but be nice and rigid, the better your rocket will be. Another thing that I've seen students do is they'll make a fin. So here's a short little fin, okay, like this. But when they design it, they'll actually make it so it's like a butterfly. So they use the 2 flaps of a box. That allows it to be kind of symmetrical. Then they can glue or tape it together, and that'll make the cardboard a little bit more rigid because it's double the thickness. The problem that sometimes happens is when they glue it, it ends up curving a little. So they want to make sure that it doesn't curve, or use a thicker cardboard. All right, so that's the fins, and using a tracer and adding little tabs so that you can attach it to your rocket. A bigger fin is more likely to be wobbly and sometimes creases and kinks, but grabs more air on the way up and makes it more stable. So you try to find a balance that works for you. We'll do the nose cone next. Right, the nose cone. So often when people grab a piece of cardboard and they draw a circle, they end up with a circle that isn't very big. And once you start to roll it around to make your cone, it ends up being just a little too small. Doesn't really work as well as they want. So you want to make the nose cone as big as you can. Well, within reason. So here's a box of cereal, some Cheerios. And what I did is I took a piece of string along the length to get a sense of the length, and then I took that string and I folded it in half so I could find the middle. I took a felt pen, and I kind of marked the middle of that string, put it back down across, and now I was able to mark where the middle of the box would be. You could do it on whatever shape that you have. I didn't actually use my space as best as I could. If I had made this circle a little more over here, that might leave more cardboard, but it's actually okay because I still have room for my fins if I need it. Anyway, so now what I do, if you have good string and you have the ability to sort of pinch the center, you can make a loop even sometimes and sort of draw a circle all the way around. I find that it never works. It always ends up all over the place. So what I do is I place it down and draw my little tick marks as I go around the circle in different directions. And just have a bunch of dotted lines, and then I can just freehand it. It doesn't have to be a perfect circle. Often people make different shapes anyways. You can actually cut out a section of the circle too if you don't want it to be a whole circle. I'll show you what I mean by that in just a second. There's going to be some overlap. So if a person wanted to, they can cut out, part of it, and it doesn't really matter. I like to leave some overlap. It gives a bit more strength, gives me a bit to tape, and it also adds a little bit of weight. And you do want the nose, if you were to put your finger in the middle of the rocket, you want the nose to be slightly heavier, just slightly heavier, so that it's more stable on the way up, but different thing. Okay, so now I need to cut one line into the center. So I have my circle, I have a line cut up to the center, and now I can bend it around and make a nose cone. Now that nose cone is way too big for my bottle, so I have to figure out a way to make it longer so that it's a longer nose cone. And the way I'll do that is by wrapping it tighter and tighter. Now, it can be hard with the cereal box to do this. You kind of have to like work it a few times, and keep trying to bend it around. I have looked online and seen that there's some ways you can make nose cones out of like cutting a big triangle. I don't know, I didn't have great success with it. This is one of the things that I always struggle with, is the nose cone. I've had some students, they just make these amazing nose cones, and I'm always so impressed by it. But anyways, if I keep rolling this, trying to get it a little bit narrower. Now, one of the reasons to have a larger nose cone is if it can be nice and long and perfectly symmetrical, it'll reduce the amount of friction to the air resistance, so it'll be able to enter through the air better and go further. Trade-off is if your nose cone is really long and it is slightly crooked, it will cause the rocket to go on a curved trajectory. The one thing that I find is if people end up wanting to make a parachute, which I'll show you in just a minute, it gives more space to have your parachute in there. These small little nose cones, there ends up not being enough room for the parachute, and so then people build kind of like a sleeve up around the side of the bottle to kind of create room for their parachute. Then sometimes the parachute gets stuck in there. And anyways, if you're doing a parachute, you don't even have to do a parachute. A lot of students choose not to, but if you decide to do a parachute, the longer nose cone does give you a bit more room to put your parachute in there. Let's see if I've got, that's getting there. It's not too bad. Need some tape. The other thing that you'll discover with the nose cone, this way anyways, is it ends up not being exactly level, it ends up being on a slight curve. So then I cut off, and if I was really curious, I'd figure out the exact shape, how to make it so it has a straight bottom. But anyways, I want it to be straight up and down from any direction. When it's on the bottle. Actually not too bad. So that it goes straight. If it's crooked, it'll cause it to go into different directions. Okay, so we want it to be nice and straight. You could just tape your nose cone on, be done with it. There's my nose cone, and I'm good to go. If you're going to have a parachute though, generally the parachute is inside here, and we need a way for when it gets up to the top that it separates and the parachute comes out. Now, most just do it with just enough friction, but not too much friction, and hope that when it tips sideways, it just kind of comes out on its own, and it's kind of random. That's pretty much how we do all of them. Some come up with kind of elaborate mechanisms for them to be able to come out. The key thing is we're not allowed to have any metal or anything that's hard that we use in there, because we don't want this thing, if it doesn't come out, when it starts coming down, it goes up like a rocket, comes down like a missile, and we don't want anyone to get hurt or anything to get broken. So we can't put anything heavy or anything that's gonna fall or separate. Everything that's part of the bottle rocket needs to stay attached to the bottle rocket. We don't want things separating and coming down and possibly hurting or breaking anything, or anyone, I suppose. Okay, so if you are doing fins and a nose cone only and wanting to just launch it, see how high it goes, You can tape your nose cone on, try and make it nice and straight. You can attach your fins. Okay, try and make them parallel, nice and straight, and decide if you're going to have 3 or 4. Do space them evenly. You don't want this kind of scenario where it ends up looking like a plane. This one's missing a fin. You've taken it off. Okay, so you either want 3 or 4. I generally go with 3 instead of 4, only because it's so hard to get them straight. I like to just do 3. Less is more, as they say, but 4 does have its advantages as well. So you can decide. Sometimes I've had students do 4 big ones and then little small ones in between to come up with different designs and different ideas. Now for the parachute. The parachute is totally optional. You don't have to do the parachute, but it is really cool when the parachutes work. It comes out and it goes really slow on the way down and you get the best time. The challenge here is most time in the air, not the highest distance. That's the goal that we're trying to achieve, is the highest time. Okay, so parachute, garbage bag, and a circle. You can probably guess how I made my circle. I could have used the length of string and went all the way around. I didn't actually. I just eyeballed it because, again, the shape doesn't really matter. A lot of people end up making like octagons or different things like that. So I just drew a circle on a garbage bag, and now I will cut it out. And when it comes to cutting, depending on the ability of your scissors, sometimes it's easier to just kind of pull it through the scissors instead of trying to cut. I'm not even really cutting exactly on the line. It doesn't have to be a perfect circle. Okay. So now I have a piece of circle from a garbage bag, kind of a circle. One thing a lot of people don't realize when it comes to a parachute is it needs a hole in it. You need a hole in the middle. Otherwise, when it fills up with air and it's coming down, the air has to go somewhere. It gets pushed up sideways, and it does this sideways, and it does this kind of thing. So you do need a little hole in the middle, or a little flap of some sort. So I'm cutting a hole. So I have a hole in the middle of my parachute. Okay. A bag is not a toy. Don't play with it. Okay. Now it comes to attaching the string to the parachute. So what I do is take a little bit of tape and tape a little tab like that. So I have a little piece of tape there. And now if I poke a hole through this, it is going to be stronger, not stretch out. Instead of poking a hole, I'll cut a little hole with the tips of the scissors. And now I have a little hole that I can tie the string to, okay? And I would put in 8, 1 here, 1 there, 1 there, 1 there, a couple in between, maybe 4, go with 4 connectors, it's up to you. 8 makes it nice and symmetrical, keeps it puffed out, but then it's more likely that the strings are all gonna get tangled and messed up. Maybe start with 4, see how that works. So you'll have your 4 strings attached. I'll just do 1, kind of show how it would work. How long should the strings be? These are all the variables for you to figure out and play with. So tie it off. And now what I can do is I have my strings, say I have a bunch of them, I can tape it to the center of the bottle here, have my parachute, and the way I like to do it is I have it taped and attached, I have my parachute, and I go fold, 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 fold back and forth like a zigzag. Same with the strings, forward, back, forward, back, forward, back, and then I have them right there. That way it just kind of unzippers on the way, when it comes out, it just goes unfolds all the way out. Instead of just wrapping in a circle, it almost always gets tangled. So I fold, 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 all the way in. Have this like this. And now the way it works is I'm not attaching this, well, I'm not taping this nose cone down. I want it to be loose, but just tight enough so that it goes up, but when it starts to tip over, it falls, and out comes the parachute. But remember the rule, we're not allowed to have anything come completely loose and come down and possibly hit someone or become lost. So I need to have a way to also attach the nose cone. So what you can do there is tape a piece of string or a piece of paper or some sort of attachment so that the nose cone stays attached. So I might tape a piece of string there. I'll add that for the nose cone. Remember how I fold things up? Go forward, back, forward, back, forward, back. Put that one in there. My nose cone. Now it goes up, gets to the top. I hope that it separates. This can fall, air can catch that, opens up my parachute, and it all comes fluttering down. I need at least 3 more strings attached to this though to open it up. Okay, so your goal, the 2-liter bottle, is to make at least 3 fins, 1 nose cone, attach it together. You want to do a little decorating, you want to paint it, you come up with other ways to do things, do a little research, you can go for it. Do not use hot glue to attach your anything to the bottle. If you use hot glue, there's a very high risk that you will have created a small hole in your bottle, and when we pressurize it next week, it'll leak and or explode or break or tear, which is quite exciting, but also sad because it wrecks your bottle. So I do not recommend hot glue. I have seen students do it. Sometimes it works out, but generally it doesn't work. The other thing to keep in mind is when we pressurize these bottles, they do stretch ever so slightly, and sometimes that can cause a bit of a problem with the hot glue. So just use tape or some sleeve that you wrap around the bottle, and then you can hot glue to that. I'll show you what I mean. I've seen students do this. They make something that goes around the bottle, and now they can hot glue to their heart's content or do all kinds of things that they're attaching to that, and then that's just wrapped around the bottle. Or sometimes I've seen students extend it out a little bit to make the bottle a little bit longer, and then it gives them a spot to put the parachute or put an egg or something like that to see if they can have it survive. So that creates a little bit of an area. So wrapping a sleeve around the bottle to create different looks, that's totally allowed, and gives you other options, but not necessary. At a bare minimum, 3 fins and a nose cone. A little extra if you want to try and take on the challenge, it's a parachute, and you can go from there. Have fun, and next week I will show you how to make a launcher.